Broadcast is live.
Broadcast is live. Good morning and welcome to Wombs with a View, Maternal Musings with Jenny and Mika. I'm Jenny, and today we have with us...
My name is Ilana Grostern, and I'm a Self-Attunement Coach, and I'm so happy to be here with you today, Jenny.
We're so lucky to have you. So we were just saying a little bit, I think Ilana and I have known each other for a number of years, maybe even going on 10.
Could be.
In various capacities, and she has all kinds and has always had all kinds of amazing information and insight to share with women, like in general. I remember many years ago being part of a food group, which I think still exists.
I was looking for it, and I'm wondering if it's still there.
Well, we'll ask around. Maybe they've changed the name of it, because that also it has evolved. If something, a Facebook has been there for that many years. Anyway, Ilana is very much a leader, and has helped many people in many different ways that I've just watched, that has always just seemed to informally come from the heart, if I can say it like that. Like she's someone who's there as, you know, strong, and I worked for her for a moment too. I was
trying to remember that.
AppleCheeks Cloth Diapers. She's one of the co-founders and owners of AppleCheeks Cloth Diapers, and I still recommend those diapers of any diapers to all my clients, and I was never paid to do that. So welcome. Thank you so much. Today we are going to be talking about intuition in parenting and in parenting, birth, pregnancy, all of these things, because Ilana, with many of the hats that she does wear, is now, as she mentioned a moment ago, a self-attunement coach. So can you tell us, Ilana, a little bit about your path and how you ended up taking on this? You can't call it a new career, because I mean you've been coaching people, it seems, maybe your whole life, and also maybe the subtlety of like coach and why that maybe rubs people the wrong way, or we're not really sure what that means.
Okay, a bunch of different topics to dig in here into here. So I'll start a little bit with what my relationship is to parenting and childbirth intuitively. I am 45 years old right now, and I have 3 daughters, 17, 14, and 11. And in my early 20s, I had a bit of an awakening moment, an epiphany, I like to call it, where I was really a hypochondriac. I was raised by parents who rushed us off to the doctor for everything and suppressed all our symptoms with medication. And I remember being on my own in my early 20s and like just being afraid for myself all the time. And one morning, I don't know what I got exposed to, but I remember I was 25 years old, and I was like, there's got to be a different way to approach my life experience. I can't just be afraid all the time. So I went back to school. I studied at the NHC, which is now defunct, the Natural Health Consultants Institute. And I was working towards a certification in nutrition and natural health. So that was my first real step on this, like, connecting with this voice inside of me that said, there's something different. There's another way to do things. And it really exposed me to a number of paradigms. And at that time, I was just about to get married, and I think I got married while I was studying, and then we started trying to get pregnant, and it really took me quite a while to get pregnant, that first one. And I started working, after medical system ruled I was perfectly fine and perfectly healthy, and my husband at the time as well. I started working with a therapist who was practicing as a therapist. She was trained as a psychotherapist, but she was actually a homeopath. And she would like challenge me on certain limiting beliefs I had. And it really got me into the habit of, like, when something popped into my head, I was starting to question where that came from and how true it was. So it was really very early on that I started recognizing that there was a script in my head that was telling me one thing, but perhaps there was another way to approach this. So I am grateful for the amount of time it took me to get pregnant, because there was a lot of reckoning I had to do with some ideas. In the meantime, I instilled a whole other level of indoctrination about parenting, which was totally counter to the mainstream culture about how we raise kids. And it was really based on the concept of attachment parenting. I don't know if that's a phrase, or that exists now the same way that it did, but it was based on really traditional cultures about how these more matriarchal traditional cultures raise children in community. The idea that, the baby in the beginning is never put down, is never on their own. There's always somebody holding it. And I love that idea, except what I didn't account for was the fact that I was not raising this baby in a community of mothers. It was just me.
Oh my God, I hear you, mama. And then don't we all burn right the fuck out?
Yeah, exactly.
We've been wearing and we're touched out at the end of the day.
Exactly. So like everything else. So it's just like moving from one extreme to the other. But, fast forward 17 years later, also my first child was what we called high needs. We found out later that she's highly intellectually gifted, and that's a whole other area of the work that I do. So stuff I did not know about, but luckily I was 27 when I had her, and I had a lot of resources at that point. So, I also the whole birthing paradigm, like this thing that women have been doing for every species does it, just births naturally. And then the word naturally now is like, it has way more significance than it needs to, because it's like, it means you're opposing the system in a way. So I had my babies at home. And at that point, we couldn't even have this midwife supported home birth. I had to go outside. I had to find a group of midwives who at that point, they were pretty much doulas. They couldn't call themselves doulas, to support me to have the birth that I wanted, and had to pay for it out of pocket. And it was one of the most wonderful and joyous experiences of my life. I don't think I've ever felt so powerful. Like just that birth experience of this person saying to me, you got to figure out how to let that baby out of your body. So I said, I got to figure out how to let that baby out of my body.
And it is such a contrast of what we see most. Of course, Meek and myself, we teach prenatal classes, we teach hypnobirthing classes. We have seen beautiful intuitive births go down at the hospital. That said, the vast majority are not. The vast majority, there is a stealing of the birth. I'm too emotional at the moment to talk more about that, but what you went through at home, and this is kind of, if we could say, even making a resurgence right now with COVID, and with people understanding the different parameters that are in place with COVID, and choosing to stay home and choosing to raise on their own. This is happening a lot again right now here in Montreal.
I'm glad to hear that's happening. It's really like the medical system co-ops our birth. You said the stealing, but it really steals the show. It also steals the experience from women. And what I think really did it for me, and that actually also kind of like screwed with my head, was I read something somewhere about orgasmic birth. How that was a thing and that was a possibility. And I was like, oh, well, what the heck is that concept? So I think that concept really was what tipped the scales for me. I was like, it doesn't have to be, my body is not a mechanistic model of like, it has to do this on this timeline, and if it doesn't, it needs this interference. No, there's something much deeper here. There's something much more primordial that I want to experience about it. So it was really like, I remember going into that birth, not like with zero fear. And that's, I think, exceptional. Like we're scared from the get-go. So for me, really by checking out of the system very, very early on, I almost like immunized myself against fear, because I moved deeply into the deep intuition and the deep knowing of my body, and into a space of like really trust and faith. And when I talk about faith, which I do a lot in my coaching practice, this is non-denominational faith. It's just, it's more to do with trust. There's something bigger than ourselves. We're part of something. We're not alone. We're not cut off. And when we can tap into that, the flow, like the experiences are peaceful. Like birth can be violent. I think probably even my experience of it, part of it, like just the opening and everything there was a violent parting, but like, it was beautiful. It was peaceful. It was empowering. And then I had 2 more home births after that. There were just like these amazing walks in the park, because I just knew, and I was surrounded by women as well.
So you had, I'm so happy. I didn't actually know you had all your babies at home. But you had this moment, right? So I also grew up as a hypochondriac. So when COVID hit, however long ago it was, I was actually quite panicked. Now I'm anyway.
I'm grateful for the space that you're in. It's entertaining on a lot of levels, but also
I'll leave that part at that. But so you were talking about being raised in a certain way, which we're all raised in our certain ways. We're all probably raised in a very similar way, and sort of conditioned from day one, obviously, to believe all of these things. And mostly what we're being taught is how not to listen to our instincts and how not to listen to ourselves. So then, you had this moment, you had this turning point, but I'm quite sure most people don't have that turning point before they go into labor. So, how can we help people shift? If anybody's watching this right now and might be pregnant or might be, thinking about having a child, how can we start, aside from booking a coaching appointment with you, Ilana? How can we start to kind of shift and rediscover? We were born, quite soon after we're born, even now with, like Ilana's talking about attachment parenting, which again, I don't know if people are using, I still use that word because that's what I called it. And I had the books and I had the way to do it. I breastfed till the kids were, 55, pretty much. I saw the funniest thing on Facebook was like, if you're worried that your child's still going to be nursing at 18, he will still be cuddling up to a breast at 18, but it won't be yours. Anyway, point being, like, how do we then have, it's not even like, I feel like I know too, Ilana, this is really interesting because Mika currently is studying somatic experiencing, and I know that this is something you're into. I don't know to what level, but I'm thinking too of how much trauma needs to or can only be released through movement. I'm asking 100 questions right here, but I'm trying to maybe guide people who are, oh my gosh, I'm giving birth soon. And yeah, what the hell even is my intuition? I don't even know what that word means. Yeah. What you could kind of say to them?
I think, I can, from my own experience, what I think, thank you, immunize against fear. I think what really shifted for me was, okay, so just kind of related but not related. I'm in a Facebook group, and I went in and it was on a very specific theme, and I asked a question. And as happens on Facebook, when you ask a question, you get the 360 degrees of answers and opinion. And, there's a lot of judgment and so on and so forth. But I have many years of experience in social media and not responding properly. So my whole philosophy now is if I ask the question, I need to be receptive to the answers. If I'm not prepared to be receptive to the answers, don't ask the question. It just puts you, all you end up in is you're looking for an echo chamber. Be intentional about what your desire is. So I think really the thing that has to happen is to be receptive, not just to answers, but to like really listen to what the question is that you're trying to ask, and starting there. So part of what I do in my work is I teach people what the mind does, and the mind, its purpose is to make connections between things, but it doesn't have the capacity to question what those connections are. So to start challenging, or not even challenging, but sitting with the questions that come into our mind, sitting with the beliefs that come into our mind without having to fast forward into the answer. Just sit with the question. What do I believe about birth? What do I believe about my body? Now, if the question pops in really, really quickly, it comes from the mind. But in my work, what I do is I teach people to access all the information, all the data that's stored in the body.
Sorry, did you say that? You said if the question comes up quickly. Do you mean if the answer comes up quickly?
Sorry, if the answer to the question comes up really, really quickly, then chances are that's scripts and programming. It's not what's right for us. It's not what we know. It's not our deep intuitive knowing. Deep intuitive knowing exists in this moment in the body, and we're all like, we're walking around. This is this concept of the Cartesian split. I think, therefore I am. All of our weight is in here, but the body's the one that's doing the birthing. The whole being is doing birthing, not the mind. So sitting in that moment and allowing the thing to arrive in the mind, and then not needing to know the answer in that moment, begins to create a connection between the mind and the body. It allows for that knowing to start to emerge and to start to surface. So that's the first point. That's the first piece. The challenge is what happens when the truth comes up, like Do I want to give birth in a hospital? Do I want to have all this? Do I want to have all that? And the answer is no. That's the challenge, is what do you do with that? And that's where your work, starts to come in. So what I do in my practice complements what you do in your practice, which is bringing women or bringing, female-bodied people into a whole birth experience where the mind and the body are working in communion, and exchanging information to bring us into this moment. Like, stuff happens in birth. Stuff has always been happening in birth. Outcomes in birth are not necessarily better than they were, because we're only looking at infant mortality rates. We're not looking at what you're talking about. What Mika's studying is the impact of trauma, all many different facets of the birthing process. So if we simply respond to this mechanistic view of birth and the impact of the system, all it is about is a healthy baby coming up. Healthy has health, like, especially in this day and age, healthy is a very loaded.
Well, and for sure. And it's the line, mom's okay, baby's okay, everything's okay.
Right.
And the trauma. And I had some of that with my first birth was a hospital birth, and it was not, it was not terrible and all, but it definitely went in this cascade. And, I went in and I wasn't going to have an epidural, and then I had one, and we kind of watched all the things I knew that would probably happen. They kind of went down. But, at the end of the day, I was fine. Baby was fine. That was the line that they told me. That was the line that I believed for years, until my second home birth with midwives. That was so completely healing, because our birth experiences, we carry those, whether we acknowledge them or not. And we often say a birth could end in cesarean, and a woman could walk away from that experience feeling very empowered if she was part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus if she feel like her birth was taken away. Co-op, that this was such a perfect word. I'm going to use that. Thank you. We carry it, and it is a trauma. And probably no matter how your birth goes, there is some traumatic experiences to it.
Yeah. And the work that Mika's doing with the somatic experiencing, that's the work of Peter Levine. It's super powerful work, and there's a component of that I'm using in my work. I'm not looking to do trauma release. It's the coaching modality, which creates deep shifts and deep change from the inside out. And there's all these modalities work together to bring people, whatever your experience is, into the wholeness of this moment. And birth is really this moment. It's, if you watch animals, they go off, they remove themselves from any distraction. Animal birth will arrest if they're not allowed to go off and do this quietly. And we're expected to give birth with bright lights and everybody looking at us and like totally exposed and totally vulnerable. So the body processes do shut down, which is why this whole, this cascade starts to happen. But as you said, there's nothing, like, I'm fully supportive of women giving birth in the situation that works best for them. But the conversation has to start to include non-medical paradigms, or should always have included non-medical paradigms. And
they did once, and then we burned all the witches. And now
we're still here. We've risen from the flame, from the ashes. Just like we are taking back our birth experiences and our parenting experiences. It's just, it's conversation. And also it's most women, I don't know how I managed to find, maybe because I always create communities.
You do.
I pull to myself what I need. And now I'm trying to participate more in communities and offer support through there, because I don't have the same need to create anymore. Just like, how can I contribute, and how can I support, and how can I offer different viewpoints? But allowing ourselves to be exposed to different ideas, that's challenging. People come from family structures that don't like to be challenged, and there's a lot riding on the shoulders of women who challenge. A lot. We got a big burden placed. So but the four trauma responses, which are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn kind of thing. It's almost easier to be a fight type, like I am. I think that's my trauma response, is to like fight against everything. Any sense that I'm being constrained or constricted, that's what I've had to work through recently.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I think it's easier for people like us to challenge, to be the outsiders, to be the outliers, that comes with its own trauma, but it allowed me for sure to say, no, I don't want to do that. And, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do it my way. And I did. And am I lucky that it worked out? I think there's a certain amount of luck for sure. Like there's stuff we can't control, but I really harnessed my own power. And I
as you mentioned, you were also able to do it because of where you were birthing. It is again possible, but very difficult to harness your own power in the hospital. Whether you're the doula present or not, it is often just a bulldozing.
Yeah,
you often don't even have a You're often set up in this very specific way that the birth is going to be controlled so that the nurses are going to be able to observe you and monitor you while you're flat on your back. And
there's protocols. The hospital has protocols. There's major liability issues. Exactly. You have to birth on a timeline that's not your own, and it's the same way, like anything to do with the feminine flow, and I'm talking feminine, masculine, not female, male, there cannot be timelines. Like my midwives had timelines for sure. They had, I think when I was outside the system, it wasn't a big deal, but I noticed the difference between my first birth, those with these doulas, and the second two that were through the system. Very different. Mm-hmm. I'm happy I had that first birth without anybody breathing down my neck about how things were supposed to be. That was really incredibly empowering to say, you figure it out. I'm leaving. I'll come back when it's time, kind of thing. Like, you're on your own, just do this thing. And I was like, I'm going to do this thing because I'm not being left alone for that long. It really put me into the driver's seat and it's ironic to say the driver's seat. There is no driver's seat with birth. It is the opposite of that. In fact, it has to be about surrender and allowing, like something is passing through you, something enormous, two have become one in that moment. You have to open to that. And when you're fighting for self-protection and everything's going like this, we cannot be in those two states at once.
Yeah. Really nicely said. Thank you. We will talk about this again. I'm wondering if you could bring that out. So you have three, you got big girls now.
Can
you bring this kind of into parenting then?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So I will say that my three births were cakewalks compared to raising my children. I would give birth every day of the week, but I don't want more children and I don't want more babies. I think, as much as I had indoctrinated myself, I think indoctrinating myself about the paradigm of birth worked in my favor. Indoctrinating myself and being dogmatic about my parenting really did not do anybody any favors. So that was also, but that was, it was a very similar conversation about what is my intuition saying about parenting versus what everybody else is telling me. So attachment parenting meant my child just breastfed at will. I baby wore them. I actually built a baby wearing company, Azure Wraps, years back based on this concept.
I didn't know that was you.
Azure Wraps.
Oh my God.
Well, Azure is my kid.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there you go.
All of that. Look at that.
First AppleCheeks afterwards. So the baby part of it was really interesting because I had this these totally helpless individuals who were completely dependent on me. So I could kind of do what I wanted with them. But at the same time, they had their own opinions. This first kid, man, I talk about this a lot with her. So the conversations we haven't had, she never slept 40 minutes at a time around the clock. It's only because I was 27 and really spitting fire that I didn't die from having that kid. She took everything out of me. But I really part of it was she couldn't let go of me and I couldn't let go of her. And I couldn't separate myself out from some trauma that I had that she was going to die if she wasn't with me, or I was going to die. One of us was going to die. So we've been working on de-enmeshing her and me for the last 17 and a half years. And we're now a little bit more independent. But this is where the community aspect was really lacking for me. And my intuition was telling me, build community. So I did. I had this amazing mother group. We used to meet twice a week at Starbucks on Monkland, and we were like each other's survival. So if I hadn't had these women, and these are still my best friends and my sisters 17 years later, we bonded over the trauma of having children in a society that's really anti-mother and anti-children. I knew intuitively I needed to surround myself with women who were at the same level of experience. I was here without family. My mother would come in, every once a month and stay for a bit. And it was like the only time I felt like I could hand this baby over to somebody who knew what to do with her. Like even my co-parent at that time was coming to me all the time and saying, I can't make her stop crying. She needs to breastfeed. I was like, find another way. I need my body for 2 minutes. Like when we parent in these vacuums and we're mothers left alone and we have really strong opinions, it destroys the rest of our relationships and it destroys the life around us. Like we almost have to dissolve and not exist anymore in order to understand how much loss that can. Okay, I'm going on a tangent.
I have full body chills right now. I'm thinking of myself and what I lived through, and I'm thinking of, postpartum clients that I currently have right now.
Mm-hmm. So the question is, like, again, we have the babies, we've been through this enormous experience. We just don't have time to process it. We can't stop. I remember like a few days after I gave birth, my mother was holding the baby and I was living in an apartment at that time. And I ran down 3 flights of stairs to do laundry. And then I started bleeding really heavily afterwards, because if it had been because she was looking after the baby. So I was like, well, there's all this other stuff to do. I should have been told, sit on your ass for 2 weeks and recover from this birth, because it set me up in a spiral of then scarcity. Like my own survival was at risk, and I couldn't, because I had all my attention went to this baby, keeping her alive, but there was nobody keeping me alive because I was still supposed to be taking care of everything else. There was no proper structure set up. So I think the culture of parenting is, again, mechanistic, black and white, this whole sleep training thing, the whole sticking a kid on a bottle because heaven forbid, you'll never be able to leave them. Well, really, they really should never be left alone. And that was what my intuition was telling me. Don't ever leave this kid alone. But there was nobody else to take over. So there's too much that mothers have to contend with and too much responsibility. And at the end of the day, society will always point finger at the mother. That's the sad truth of it. So we can't be pointing fingers at each other. So we need to be building and being part of communities where everybody can be heard, everybody can be listened to, everybody can be seen, and parents can move into deep trust of their instinct as well. I'm working with women now who have so much trauma from their birth, from almost losing babies because the kids were sick and something was wrong. And everybody said to them, no, mama, that's just you. She's fine. But no, the mother knows. The mother knows that something's up. So in the work that I do, there's what we think is intuition, which is really hypervigilance and trauma, because nobody has ever been there to take care of us, so that we could really do the work of tuning into what we needed and what the baby needed. And my own experience, I'm grateful for everything that I went through. It's really just that first kid. The other two were could have raised themselves compared to that other. They're so easy compared to that first kid, and still are so easy compared to that first kid. It was that whole birthing her and raising her to now has given me so much information. And for a long time, I wanted to shout and pass on, and Paul Revere or I'm trying to think of parables. I felt like I was that beacon, and I needed to tell women. I needed to alert them. But what I actually need to do is, and what we need to do, and what those of us who have been through it, is move into our own experience and what we've learned to deeply hold space for women to figure themselves out. Without being told. We don't need to be told anymore. We need to listen. We need to listen to ourselves, and we need to listen to each other. And that's the hard work.
I think when people drop the mic on stage, you just did it. Amazing. I thank you so much. I know I've been saying for a couple of weeks, I'm going to book a meeting with you. I'm going to book a meeting with you. I can't wait to actually do some of this with you. We all need someone to hold us. So I'll hold these people. You hold me. You're being held by someone.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's my role now, is to hold space so deeply so that those of us who have this information and have these callings that are deeper than ourselves can listen, and we have to stop responding from fear. We need to move into a seat of deep safety within ourselves, move deeply into our, from an esoteric perspective, our root chakra, and live there and vibrate from there and resonate from there, so that we're safe spaces for those who are just starting out on their journeys to connect with their knowing. And this is what we do for our kids, and this is what we do for our community, and this is what we do for fellow women. And your work is so important, Jenny. And, you know, I'd like to support you in any way I can to, you know, reach your work further, reach your resonance further.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thank you, Jenny.
Can you just give people a little heads up of where they can find more information about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm a self-attunement coach, and I'm going to show you in a coaching format how to listen to the wisdom of your body. You can find me at ilanagrostern.com. Also, my name, Ilana Grostern Coaching, on Facebook and on Instagram. And there's a free 30-minute session you can book so I can hear what you need, and you can hear how I work, and we can figure out if it's a fit. And you know, and I'm just here to listen and to support and to move into a hearing space with you.
Thank you so much. We'll have you on again soon, very soon, because I didn't get quite enough time to pick your brain.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of really powerful conversations.
Thank you so much for your insights, and wow, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Jenny.
We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.